Shadow, Shadow, Shadow. One of the most popular characters in not only the Sonic series, but in all of gaming. Since his introduction in Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow has gone on to star as a playable character in many Sonic games, nearly every spin-off. He's even one of the few characters to have his own game, and now he's going to play an integral role in the upcoming Sonic 3 movie. It's crazy to think that Shadow was originally just going to be a one-off character for Sonic Adventure 2, but he was so popular, Sega had no choice but to keep bringing him back. I absolutely love Shadow. He's one of the coolest characters in the series in my opinion, and I'll take every excuse I can to make more videos on him, especially right now to celebrate the new movie. You guys seem to like my tier list on weapons in Shadow the Hedgehog, so I'm gonna follow it up with another tier list. And this one is an idea that I got from commenters on my last video, but it's a bit different from what was suggested. Some people were suggesting that I do a tier list for the missions in Shadow the Hedgehog, which I did want to do, but the more I thought about it, the more it became clear that it would be hard to do a fair and balanced tier list of that, because I just put all the normal missions at the top, and I also wanted to do more than just rank the stages. So what I'm going to do here is rank all of Shadow's stages throughout the entire Sonic series. Not just in Shadow the Hedgehog, but every single one of his stages in every game that he stars in, including Shadow Generations, which some people also wanted to see a video on. Now, in this list, I'm only going to be including Shadow's own stages in his games. So, stages where only he's playable, or stages where he has his own version. For example, I'm not going to be including any stages from Sonic Heroes because, well, for one, they're not just his stages, they're Team Dark stages, and he's just one member of that team. But also, they are the same stages that you play as in the Hero story, but with small changes. I will be including his stages from Sonic 06 though, because even though his stages have the same name and theme as Sonic and Silver stages, they're redesigned for Shadow, so that still counts. I also won't be including anything from spin-offs. I'm only looking at platforming games. Now that that's been established, let's get started. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Girls Frontline 2 Exilium. For those of you that haven't heard of Girls Frontline, it's a free-to-play mobile RPG for iOS and Android that brings all of your favorite weapons to life in the form of beautiful tactical dolls. And now, the sequel is coming out, bringing with it everything that made the first game great and much more. The sequel uses physically based rendering technology with a non-photorealistic rendering art style, and the gameplay improves upon the exciting and strategic turn-based gameplay of the first game. Combine this with some excellent graphics, animations, and artwork, Girls Frontline 2 is a game that is not only fun to play, but a beauty to look at. In addition to this, you can get to know your tactical dolls by interacting with them in the dormitory and refitting rooms, and you can learn more about them and their unique backstories. The game has just officially launched, and it's already making waves, and millions of users have already pre-registered. Don't miss your chance to download the game right now using either the QR code on screen or the link down below in the description, and you will be able to claim up to 120 free pulls. Be sure to check out Girls Frontline 2. Download right now and get an early start in your exciting campaign and seeing everything this game has to offer. I want to give a big thanks to Girls Frontline 2 for sponsoring this video, and now, let's get back to the video. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the video, and we're going to be going by game in order of release, and we're going to start with Sonic Adventure 2. And what better place to start than with Radical Highway, and I'm going to put this stage in... yeah, I'll put it in A. Radical Highway is just great level design for Shadow, and a great way to introduce the character. It's a great mixture of speed, platforming, exploration, grinding, combat, everything great about the speed stages in Adventure 2. There are different pathways you can take, the level design allows you to make and take shortcuts, but also it's a perfect representation of who and what Shadow is in contrast with Sonic. Take Sonic, his first stage is about escaping from the military through a busy city, just like Radical Highway, but they have completely different vibes because one is set at night and has more intimidating music, while the other is set during the day and has uplifting music. It's a perfect analogy. Sonic is more cheerful and upbeat, while Shadow is more hard-headed and serious, and that's reflected in their first levels. Even the stage's color palette resembles Shadow's, and it also gets some extra points for having an upgrade despite being the first stage, putting a lot of confidence in first-time players. I mean, the dark story is designed to be played after the hero story, but there's nothing preventing new players from beating the dark story first. That's what I did, because I had already played as Sonic through Adventure DX. I wanted to see what this new guy was about. So yeah, Radical Highway is a great stage, simple as that. And that brings us to our next stage, White Jungle, which is Shadow's equivalent of Green Forest, and I do think this is a good stage, but not as good as Radical Highway, so I'm gonna put it in B. I mean, again, it's a good stage, but it feels a little too similar to Green Forest. Like, it features a lot of the same gimmicks like the vine swinging, although there's less of that and more of those vines that fling you forward, which I actually think are cooler, especially in the parts where you're using them to jump between islands. And the level overall just feels like you have more freedom. It doesn't railroad you as much as Green Forest does. One thing that's not really a complaint, but I mean, if the dark story is supposed to be harder, why does White Jungle give you 10 minutes to complete? That's more than Green Forest, which was 8, but the stage is shorter. In the footage I'm showing, I beat this stage in under a quarter of that in my first attempt, and I wasn't even doing that good. So it's a good stage, but not as good as Radical Highway, and there's not enough about it to make it stand out from Green Forest. Now, the next one is Skyrail, and I think I'm gonna put this one in also B. I mean, I want to put this stage higher, but it suffers from, well, for one thing, it's the shortest speed stage in the game. It can easily be beaten in under 2 minutes if you know what you're doing, but that's also what I like about it. Its design allows you to take some pretty big shortcuts if you're skilled enough and if you know the level well enough, and the propeller springs are a neat gimmick. I also just really like the premise of this stage. Like, not only is it set in Pumpkin Hill during the day, which makes it look completely different, but as someone with a massive phobia of heights, it just feels so imposing, grinding through rails in the sky, but it's also very thrilling, and the music is great too. So yeah, Skyrail is a solid B tier stage. And now we're on, wow, the last stage in Sonic Adventure 2. I guess I never realized how short of an appearance Shadow had in this game. Well, I'm gonna put this in I'm gonna put it in C. I'm actually not a big fan of this or the space stages in Adventure 2, really. Like, I don't dislike it, but it's another stage with a heavy focus on rails. It also introduces this gimmick with these gravity tubes, which I don't actually like, because the constant spinning is annoying, and it also just takes away a lot of the freedom that you have with the other stages. Like, if you're not awkwardly being spun by the gravity tubes, you're grinding in this stage. And there's also the fact that a lot of the stage has you ascending vertically, forcing you to use these tubes to make it up there. Even the music isn't as good as the other stages, but it does have an awesome aesthetic. I'll also give it credit for being the longest of Shadow's stages, but it just makes me wish they could have put more effort into making the other stages longer. It's a good stage, but it is my least favorite of the Shadow stages in Adventure 2, and probably all the speed stages in that game, really. Now, since we're skipping over Sonic Heroes, we can move on to Shadow the Hedgehog, and we're going to be here a while because this game has 23 stages. You know, that's really something I don't think this game gets enough credit for. It is just packed with content, and these are all speed stages, which is what everyone wants, right? And we'll do this in expert mode order, which means we're starting with Westopolis. Easily the most iconic stage in this game for all the right and wrong reasons, so it's gonna go in B. What I like about this stage is just how much it sets itself apart from almost every other first stage in the series. Like, usually it's some kind of bright and colorful landscape like a beach or a green hill, if you will, but Westopolis is set in a destroyed city being invaded by aliens. You have the gun soldiers and aliens at war with one another, lasers are being fired from the sky, everything is on fire. It definitely gets you on your feet, even though most of the rest of the game isn't actually like this, and there's plenty of diversity with the level design in this game. It also introduces most of this game's mechanics very well. The branching missions, the weapons, the alignments, the light dash, and everything that previously required an upgrade but doesn't in this game. And the level is well designed enough too. But in order to unlock the last story, you have to unlock all 10 endings, and you have to play this stage in every single one of those runs. And as a hardcore defender of this game, even I can't excuse this. And it's also very strict about killing every single enemy with the Hero and Dark missions, which probably shouldn't have been how they went about it for the first stage, but Westopolis is still an iconic stage, and I don't have any problem putting it in B. Now, Digital Circuit is... I'm not actually a huge fan of this stage, so I'm going to put it in C. I mean, it looks cool, it's very bright, very colorful, but in a way that's still fitting for a game about Shadow. The whole light rail gimmick is... I don't mind it, same with the light merging thing, but I don't know. To me, there just isn't much interesting about this stage. It's also one of those stages where one mission is basically a slightly longer version of the other one. The Dark mission requires you to go beyond the goal ring to destroy the core program. Like, all you have to do is just go further and dump a few mags into this eyeball-looking thing, which doesn't even feel necessary. If one mission was gonna have an object to destroy, maybe that should have been encountered before the goal ring. If they had just switched the core with the ring, it would have been a lot better, but even that wouldn't have been enough to bring the stage above the C tier. Glyphic Canyon is... yeah, I like this stage. We'll put it in the B tier along with Westopolis. It has a really cool theme. I've always liked the ruin-themed stages in Sonic, especially Lost World, and this one reminds me a lot of that. The Dark mission is pretty simple and straightforward, and the Hero mission is actually one of the easier ones because it does give you some leniency with the enemies you need to kill. Look here, I just completed the mission and there's a sandworm right there in front of me. It also is connected to another stage in a great way that I'll get to later, but overall, yeah, this is a pretty good stage. Next up is Lethal Highway, and I think I'm gonna put this one in C. It's like a more linear version of Westopolis, but the design actually reminds me a lot of Speed Highway from Adventure 1, just less speedy and more lethal, I guess. It's got a pretty amazing soundtrack, it's great chase music, which is perfect since that's exactly what you're doing in the hero mission for the stage, chasing down and trying to destroy this tank thing, but I do think the hero mission is way too easy. I mean, this thing goes down in just a few mags from the MP5. It's so easy that failing the mission makes Sonic so mad he swears.
Damn, they got away! Leave it to me, I'll chase them down!
I do have to give it some points for it being the only stage where the motorbike is usable, but for a stage that's based on a highway, there sure are a lot of roadblocks. It's not a bad stage, but it is one of the weaker stages in this game in my opinion. Speaking of, we now move on to Cryptic Castle, which I will also put in C. I know there are a lot of people that are quite fond of the stage. In fact, there's even a Shadow the Hedgehog fan group on Facebook called Cryptic Castle Hell, but this level just doesn't click with me the same way it does with everyone else. For one thing, certain parts of the stage and completing the Dark mission requires you to use a specific kind of weapon. You have to use those blue torches to light the lanterns, and this is the weakest weapon in the game. And because it's a melee weapon, you also can't bring it with you when riding vehicles. And there are sections where you need to ride on a Black Hawk to move on, and it's easy to miss one of the torches because of how the level is designed. The second one requires you to go back to light a smaller lantern to get a bouncing ball to appear and bounce your way up, but there's nothing in the game that tells you to do that. If you miss it, Eggman doesn't tell you to go back and check for it, which is something he does for all the other lanterns. In fact, it's something all the companions do for their missions in this game. And don't even get me started on those hallways that seem like they exist for no reason other than to ruin your momentum. I also feel the need to mention that this is the only stage where you're rewarded for deliberately pissing off your companion if you're trying to do the Dark mission. Eggman wants you to light his lanterns to keep the black creatures out, and it wouldn't make sense for him to want you to destroy his own robots, and it also wouldn't make sense for you to get hero points for supporting the black creatures. So killing the robots gets you dark points, and both companions yell at you for it. I will say the stage looks and sounds awesome, and the music is just iconic. I just wish it were part of a better designed stage. Now we come to Prison Island, and I like Prison Island, so this is going to go in B. It's a cool throwback to Prison Island from Adventure 2, but it also does the vehicle mechanic really well, with you needing to cross these poisonous rivers with the alien saucers. Not only that, but it does the split pathway thing pretty well too. It has occasional forks in the road, and you need to decide to take the one that best suits your mission, and your companions will tell you which way to go. So, anyone that complains about this game being confusing and directionless with its missions, maybe you should actually listen to the game's dialogue. Also, assuming you do take the right path, it's almost impossible to miss your objectives, and even then, the Dark mission does give you a bit of leniency with killing the enemies, and there are also some great shortcuts you can take if you're skilled enough. Overall, this is a well-designed stage with a cool gimmick, and one of the few stages that makes use of vehicles well, so this is going in B. Let's see, now we're in Circus Park, this game's obligatory theme park level, and this one is... I'm gonna put this one in A, the first stage in this game to make it in this tier. It's a known fact that every Sonic game has to have at least one level that's based on either a casino or a theme park, and Shadow the Hedgehog, a game that is infamous for its apparent dark, bland, and monochrome textures, actually has a good-looking, bright, and colorful stage that somehow fits with this game's darker theme. Like, yeah, you can call this game cringe and edgy all you want, but it's still plenty cartoony, and this stage is a perfect showcase of that. I mean, it's a theme park level in a Sonic game. How could you screw that up? They don't, and they managed to make it one of the best stages in the game, and the hero mission is one of my favorites. You have to collect 400 rings, which is more than easily doable, but if you're skilled enough and make use of this stage's gimmicks like the flaming rings and the gongs and the shooting minigames, you can complete this goal pretty early. I think this is also the only stage where the new way you take damage actually makes sense for its design. In previous Sonic games, you lose all your rings if you got hit, but here you only lose 10. But it doesn't really matter much because unlike in Adventure 1 and 2, where the rings were currency in the Chow Gardens, this game doesn't have any Chow Gardens, and you can still pick them back up, which kind of makes the game too easy in my opinion. But here, that means it's not an automatic reset if you take a hit when you're close to being done. The Dark Mission also requires you to hunt down all the gun robots, and there are only 20, and they're hard to miss, which is a bonus. Now we're at Central City, and you have the honor of being the first stage put in the D tier. I really want to like Central City, but this just isn't a well-designed stage. First of all, it's the only stage that has no goal ring. Both of its missions are objective-based. The Dark Mission is okay, but the Hero Mission sucks. Okay, so for the Dark Mission, you need to set off 5 giant bombs, which is easy enough, but for the Hero Mission, you have to use a vacuum gun to suck in 20 of the smaller bombs, which are all over the place. You already know how I feel about missions that require you to use a certain weapon, but even though there are small bombs all over the place, only a few of them allow you to actually suck them in. Like, some of them are programmed to just explode. You can't even suck them in if you get close enough to them before they explode. There's nothing in the game to distinguish these bombs from the others. They even have those little blue triangles indicating that they're part of the mission. It also doesn't make any narrative sense, like Black Doom wants you to set off 5 bombs to blow up the city, but if you don't do it before the time limit runs out, which I forgot to mention that there's a time limit to this stage, but if you don't set the bombs off manually, they become duds and the mission fails. But then Knuckles wants you to defuse the smaller bombs which will go off and destroy the city after the time limit. Not to mention, the only way to get to this stage is by doing Cryptic Castle's Dark Mission, which is a dark mission, but it has you going against the aliens. Black Doom doesn't seem to mind though, so it's whatever. And I do like what this stage is narratively. The city is being attacked by aliens who have planted bombs and you need to rush to either save the city or set off the bombs to accomplish your mission. The music is also really fitting, giving you that sense of panic that the game wants you to feel when playing this stage, and it makes an okay use of vehicles, but it is still one of the game's weaker stages in my opinion. Now on to the Doom, and yeah, this is gonna go in E. It's another non-linear level, but with a much worse design, and equally as bad missions. Like, it's a maze of similar looking corridors that are connected by branching pathways, and it's just a chore to navigate. The Hero Mission also requires you to heal some researchers with these healing pods that you have to slowly carry and then throw at them. And if you miss, you have to go all the way back, wait for it to respawn, and try it again. It's as tedious as it sounds. You can heal them with the healing cannon, but you have to unlock that first. The Dark Mission requires you to hunt down 60 gun soldiers, and anyone who has played this game knows that hunting missions and non-linear levels in Shadow the Hedgehog do not mix well. It's almost as bad as Lost Impact's Hero Mission, which, believe me, we will get to, but even the music here is boring. This stage's biggest saving grace, and you can do this in Lost Impact too, but with a second controller, it lets you play as Maria. Yeah, she can't jump very high, and she has an attack that doesn't even work, but she can still kill gun soldiers by jumping into them. Maybe that's why they shot her. They were afraid of getting beat up by a little girl. let's wash the bad taste of that level out of our mouths with a great one, arguably the best one in the game in fact, Sky Troops, which is an easy A tier stage. This stage has it all. A great design, beautiful music, great missions, and it actually has a backstory that's connected to another stage. It's the same temple that Glyphic Canyon takes place in, only it's flying, which was the purpose of that stage's dark mission. I'm not sure why they put this stage where they did in the stage chart, since most people are just going to get here by doing all normal missions, which requires you to ignore Black Doom and Glyphic Canyon, but it's still neat that it's here at all. This stage also makes the best use of turrets. You can use them to shoot down Eggman's battleships, and when you do this, it plays a lot like a shooting gallery minigame. You can even shoot the cannons on the ships to get them to stop firing, and you can intercept the projectiles with your own. Then you have the hero mission, whose companion is Eggman? That just blew my mind when I played this stage for the first time as a kid. Like, the black aliens are so threatening that even Eggman is now considered a good guy in this mission. You can also use the gun jump vehicle, which is a lot of fun to use. There's a lot of enemy variety. In fact, assuming you're going all normal, this is the first stage with Black Oaks. There are also a lot of those ring shooter weapons, which is one of my favorites, and there's even a Black Hawk riding section toward the end. It's a great mixture of many of this game's mechanics bundled into a very great stage. Now we're at Mad Matrix, another cyberspace stage like Digital Circuit, and I'm gonna put this stage right above that in B tier. There are a lot of B tier stages in this game, but Mad Matrix is a really cool stage that could have been designed a little better. What I like about it is how this is probably the best non-linear stage in this game, and it's easily the biggest one too. I mean, look at this. This is all playable, and it's all connected by those light rails from before. And for the hero mission, you have to visit all of these terminals, which you have to go through and activate. And to do that, you have to play a series of mini-games where you make panels light up with all of the same color. It's really cool. The dark mission here, though, is one of the worst in the game. You have to set off mines that are scattered around on the maze. There's no radar or anything to tell you where they are, and the uncontrollable camera in this stage and short draw distance of these things means that the majority of this mission is just going to be aimlessly wandering around trying to find the last few. And it's not even fun. All you're doing is just moving along the light rail. There's hardly any planning or strategy or anything. Had this mission been better designed, this stage very well might have made it into the A tier. Next we have Death Ruins. This is kind of an underrated stage in my opinion. As I said before, I've always been fond of the ruin stages in Sonic games. I mean, Lost World is my favorite stage in Sonic Adventure 1, and I remember as a kid just staring at the background of the second act, wishing the game would let me go there and explore. And Death Ruins looks a lot like what I would expect to find there, only now there's a battle going on between gun soldiers and black aliens. And you can tell that the aliens have been working to establish a presence here, and the soldiers have fortifications set up too. It almost looks like a war zone. It's also got plenty of platforming, grinding, and combat, everything that this game does well. But the hero mission is kind of, you have to kill 50 aliens, and this mission doesn't give you any mercy, and this is one of the worst stages to have to backtrack in. Had it not been for this, it could have been an A, but it is helped by some truly awesome music. Now we're on the second to last row of stages in this game, starting with the very creatively named The Ark, which is a vehicle-focused mission, and it's going to go in C. Both missions for the stage can be done entirely on the back of a Black Volt. You don't have to get off this thing once, which is both this stage's best and worst aspect. The Black Volt is fun to ride, and its ability to shoot homing worms at the enemies is cool, but it's easy to lose track of this thing's health bar, and if you either die or miss an objective for the Dark mission, unless you've been making stops on the platforms, which you probably haven't been doing if you're trying to beat the stage as fast as possible, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, and that's never fun. Now we're at Air Fleet. Oh, this is a favorite, and it's going to go in the A tier. This stage is just so cool. The missions are fun, and the design is awesome. You're on board this airship trying to either take out this escape pod or the black aliens, depending on which mission you're doing. The Dark mission is especially fun because it forces you to find the right balance between speed and aggression. You need to make sure to keep up with the escape pod, but you also need to make sure that you have a good enough gun and enough ammo to take it out before it escapes. And this thing takes a lot of gunfire. Even with the Shadow Rifle, taking it out is a challenge. Plus, this stage also has branching paths, and this is done very well. One sends you down a path with the aliens, while the other sends you down a path with gun robots. And you can also control which way the escape pod goes so that you can keep up with it. Also, this is kind of a small detail, but I do really like how there are glass floors on the platforms, which kind of helps to remind you of just how high up you are. Same with the outside sections with the platforming and the rails. My only complaint is the stupid wind tunnel sections, where you're supposed to move through by grabbing onto these bars, but you can just spin dash through these parts easily, so you don't need to do this. But yeah, overall, very good level. Oh hey, next on our list is another level with a moving vehicle that we need to destroy. Iron Jungle, which is going to go in B. This stage is set just outside of Eggman's hidden base in the jungle, and your companion is Omega from Sonic Heroes. It has a good variety of enemies, solid missions, branching pathways for said missions. I also like how many parts of the level can be outright skipped with good enough jumps. The Dark mission is also pretty reasonable, and the Hero mission is pretty good. Again, it's another destroy the moving vehicle thing, although your arsenal is a bit more limited here compared to Airfleet. The weapon you'll be using to do the most damage is the Egg Bazooka, which has to be aimed manually, adding a certain degree of skill to it. And when the egg balloon starts taking damage, it will fire back, so that's something you have to worry about too. Space Gadget is not my favorite stage. It's not bad, but I'm just gonna put it in the middle and see. It's another arc stage, but this time there's actually platforming, and one of the gimmicks of this stage is gravity switching, which is neat, but in 2005 it wasn't as technically impressive as it was on the Dreamcast back in 2001. But I do like how it doesn't affect the enemies or objects. Like, if you destroy a robot or a piece of the stage, the debris will fly in the original direction of the gravity, which is a cool detail. Also, the hero mission here is ridiculous. What you need to do is make it to the Emerald in less than 5 minutes before Sonic, which isn't hard, but in order to do the normal mission, you need to get there after Sonic, which goes against this game's ranking system, which is primarily based on how fast you are. It's still possible to get an A rank on this stage's normal mission, but this makes it impossible to time attack, which is unbelievably stupid, especially since Shadow still gets the Emerald in the normal mission. Maybe the Emerald slipped out of Sonic's hands or something. I will say, I like how this level sends you on a completely different path if you're doing the Dark mission. Like, I've already talked about branching pathways and stages in this game, but most of them converge before the end of the stage. Not this one. After destroying the second defense unit, you're sent to what is almost a completely different stage, which is neat, but not enough to bump this stage up to a higher tier. Okay, now, Lost Impact. I already know where this one is going. Next to its brother, the Doom, in E. Whenever people bash this game for its poor level design and missions and whatever, this is one of the most common examples, and yeah, even I can't defend this stage. I mean, I want to like it, I like the design, I like the turret sections, I like the music, and I like having Maria as a companion, especially when I have a friend with me who can control her and make her knee gun soldiers in the face. But Lost Impact is easily the worst stage in the entire game because of its hero mission. You have to find and kill 35 artificial chaoses, which are the toughest enemies in the game, and they're everywhere, but not where you would expect them to be. They seem to be purposefully hidden in places where they could easily be missed, and there is no grace with these. You have to find and kill all of them. Maria also doesn't tell you to check the area if you miss one, which is something she does in the Doom, so why doesn't she do that here? It's not uncommon to spend upwards of 30 minutes in this mission, and 2/3 of that is going to be spent looking for the last one. Even the normal mission for the stage kinda sucks. Okay, we are in the last stretch, and we are starting with Gun Fortress. A, easy. I love this stage, not only for its design, music, and atmosphere, but it's also very thematic. Like, this is Shadow invading Gun at their main base, making their last stand. So they're just throwing everything they can at you, but nothing is working. In this stage, you can pick up the most powerful weapons in the game, which easily let you melt even the strongest enemies that Gun keeps throwing at you, and you just keep killing them and picking up their ammo, but they just keep throwing more and more enemies at you. Like, what else are they gonna do? And I also love how the calming music sets the tone. Like, you wouldn't expect elevator music to be fitting for invading the last stronghold of the military, but it really reflects just how depressing the situation is. It's almost like the gun soldiers in the base have accepted that they lost and are probably going to become alien food along with the rest of the human race. And I'm sure some of the higher-ups are aware of what happened on board the Ark 50 years ago and know why Shadow is so pissed off, and they're also probably mad at themselves for not being able to prevent this. The Dark mission is kind of just bog standard, like you have to destroy 3 computer thingies which are nearly impossible to miss, but this stage is also one of my favorite hero missions because, as I just said, Gun is throwing everything it's got at you, and the way scoring in this game works is that your score of the opposite alignment will count against the score for the mission you complete, so you just have to run past all the enemies that are understandably pretty pissed off at you for everything you've done to get here. You can go through to do the hero mission while fighting back, but the game's not gonna like that, and it's gonna slap you with an E ranking. The only thing I dislike about the stage is that there isn't much platforming, but I think the combat makes up for it, so I don't mind putting the stage where it is. Next up is Black Comet, and I am also putting the stage in A. It's set on board the Black Comet, the headquarters of the aliens, but it's being invaded by gun robots. You know, I think the stage looks awesome for reasons I'll explain in a little more detail when I get to the other Black Comet stage, but I just like how the stage is placed in relation to Gun Fortress. Doing all dark missions brings you to Gun Fortress where everything is going so poorly for Gun their home base is being invaded by aliens. However, if you don't go pure dark and do a few hero or normal missions, it takes you to Black Comet, where things still aren't going great for Gun, but they're doing well enough that they're able to take the fight to the aliens' headquarters. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there are more gun enemies here than there are aliens. It really feels appropriate for what is the final battle in this game. The music is kinda and there isn't much in the way of gimmicks besides using a saucer to hover over a death plane, for better or for worse. But other than that, the environment is really cool and fitting for the Black Aliens base. This is just a great stage. Now here we are in the middle at Lava Shelter, which, yeah, this is also going in A. Shadow the Hedgehog has some great final stages. This stage is Shadow confronting Eggman inside his secret base, with Omega as the companion again. There are no aliens or gun troops, it's just Shadow against Eggman and his robots. This stage has a great atmosphere. It has some great platforming, it's got some grinding sections, some speed sections. It's what you would expect from a Sonic game. And I'm sure it was designed this way on purpose because Sega probably thought that most people would just do all normal mission the first time. It also has the best key reward out of any stage, giving you an alien saucer that lets you hover over the lava, and the Dark mission is another perfect example of a different mission changing the way you progress through the level. Activating Eggman's volcanic defense systems raises the level of the lava, which makes platforming harder, and it adds death planes to areas that normally wouldn't have them. It's perfect, and the only reason Shadow does it is so that nobody else can confront Eggman. He even says it in the results screen. It doesn't have much of an effect on the ending, but I'm not ranking the endings, I'm just ranking the stages. Almost done, here is Cosmic Fall, which, yeah, I don't like Cosmic Fall. I'm putting this in D. I mean, I like the concept, the Ark is collapsing and Shadow is trying to get through by hopping on platforms while he's collapsing with them, but that means there's a lot of standing around and that's not fun. That's boring, and the platforming is either hopelessly easy or just stupid. And it has a time limit, but it feels very inconsequential. It's also one of those stages where one mission requires you to just go further, but get this. To get past the goal ring, you need to triangle jump, and if you screw it up, you have no choice but to either finish the Dark mission or restart. Yeah, locking you out of an objective and forcing you to restart because you missed a jump. Bad level design at its finest. At least it has a good key reward, giving you trails of rings that help you complete the hero mission much easier. That's pretty good. Okay, last stage on the main chart, and it's Final Haunt, which is going in B. Now, going back to the environments of the Black Comet stages, I like them because, when you think about it, the aliens have this hive mind that's commanded by Black Doom. Spoilers for a 19-year-old game, but Black Doom can speak telepathically to Shadow, and it's revealed he can do this because Shadow is part black alien. The black aliens have the same red and black color scheme as Shadow, and they also resemble Judeo-Christian demons, but they also loosely resemble insects, and this is like their hive. And there are no gun soldiers to help you out either. It's just Shadow and Sonic, and Final Hunt really nails that unsettling feeling of infiltrating that hive with little to no help. At least that's what I would be saying if it wasn't ruined by this upbeat music. There's also the fact that there are some parts where you need to extend blocks with those vacuum guns. It would be a shame if you had to drop a really good weapon that you had lots of ammo saved up for this, although some of these sections can be BS'd around, but not all of them. And much like Lava Shelter, doing the dark mission sends you on a different path. But really all it is just a few Black Hawk sections, and doing this creates a barrier that prevents you from getting to the goal ring. At least that's what it's supposed to do, it doesn't actually work. Oh, and one cool detail I noticed, just outside of the goal ring, Black Doom tracks you. It doesn't do anything, but just an unnecessary detail that I noticed. Okay, one more stage, and that is The Last Way, which is the last story stage, and it's going in B. I mean, it's just Final Haunt and Black Comet combined and on steroids. There's not a lot for me to say about it that I didn't already say about those two stages. The only unique gimmick is that there are some parts where you're required to use Chaos Control to move on, though some of these can be worked around, but not all of them, and it's just better to use Chaos Control in these situations anyway. Oh, and time limit, but it's easy. Oh, we are finally done with Shadow the Hedgehog, and we can now move on to Sonic the Hedgehog, better known as Sonic 06, and you might be expecting me to dump all these stages into E and get really angry and go on a rant about how thinking about this game offends me to my core, but I actually do not hate Sonic 06. Do I think it's some kind of misunderstood masterpiece? No, but it's definitely not one of the worst games ever made. I wouldn't even say this game is in the top 10 worst Sonic games, and I actually had fun when I was playing this game to record footage. Partially because I was emulating, which dramatically decreases the load times, but I also think it does a lot of things right, and the level design is one of them. But I can't put any of these stages in the upper tiers because, well, they are in Sonic 06, which means there's no way around a lot of that Sonic 06 jank. And before you tell me to just play Project 06, yes, I have, and it's amazing, but I'm only ranking these stages in their original, unmodified, official form. If I was including stages from fan games, this video would be longer than a feature-length film. We'll start with White Acropolis, which is a decent stage and a decent start to Shadow's story, but it's not great, so it's going in C. Sonic 06 keeps in some elements of Shadow the Hedgehog and Shadow's gameplay, like for the first part of the stage he has to find a switch to get inside, and then he hands things over to Rouge, which, yeah, this part kinda sucks, but then he has to hop into a Jeep with a rocket launcher and use it to blow up 5 searchlights. And it's fun, it's cool, but it's also short. But the level is designed well enough, and there's a lot to explore, even if you don't need to explore most of it. And the music is god tier, I'm just gonna say that. I just wish it were part of a more polished game. Now we're at Kingdom Valley, which is easily my favorite stage in Sonic 06, both for Sonic and Shadow, and I will actually put it in B tier. It opens up on a glider that lets you fire missiles, which is pretty awesome. Then Rouge has another part where she needs to find 3 keys, harkening back to her gameplay in Adventure 2, which is, I mean, it's okay. It would be better with a radar though, but I like flying around and throwing grenades at enemies, that's fun. And then we get to another vehicle section where Shadow uses a hovercraft that has a machine gun. What is not awesome about that? And then we spend the rest of the stage platforming and fighting enemies, and the combat and platforming in this game is solid. Shadow's especially with his combo homing attack and his chaos powers, but most of those won't be available until later. Next up is Crisis City, and I love this stage, I love the environment, I love the music, and the platforming and grinding and combat and everything in this stage is all very solid. When it works. If it worked more, it would be an A, but it doesn't, so it's B. There were a lot of deaths that just didn't feel like they were my fault, and I had to BS my way around some of them. We can use the gun jeep in this stage, and there's also a glider section, which I will never complain about, and best of all, it's all Shadow, no Rouge sections, and that is just great. The next stage is Flame Core, which is another decent level, but I'm gonna put it in C. There are a lot of sections where you need to open a door by killing all the enemies, which is easy enough and can be made even easier by using your chaos powers, and I also like the weird crystal cave near a volcano theme it has going for it, and I like how the whole idea of this stage is to get closer and closer to get into the volcano, even if the falling rocks that damage you are stupid and frustrating to get hit by. The platforming is good. I like how you have to hop across these little rock pillars, and I like how the lava isn't instant death when you touch it. The dark cave with the shining balls isn't really all that interesting as a gimmick, and Rouge's part feels completely shoehorned in, but it is short and straightforward and not confusing like her part in Kingdom Valley. And again, the music. It's just beautiful. Okay, Radical Train is... it's one I want to rank higher, but I think this stage suffers more from that 06 jank than most other stages do. So it's going to go in C. I mean, again, it's got good platforming, it's got cool gimmicks, the conveyor belt is neat, having to chase the train is neat. It's also the first stage where we can use the motorcycle, which not only looks more like the one in the opening in Shadow the Hedgehog, but now it has a machine gun built in. And the section at the end where you're chasing the train in this thing and have to destroy it with the machine gun, that's just awesome. When it works. It's very easy to screw something up, especially in that part where you have to jump over the passing trains with the boost ramps. And the developers knew this, which is why they put another one of these things at the end of that part. And then the train only takes damage from the machine gun when it wants to. Sometimes you can unload hundreds of rounds into it and it'll barely take a scratch. Other times, it'll blow up after just a few shots. I also have to knock this stage a bit for how short it is, but it is fun while you're playing it and when it works. What do we have next? Aquatic Base, and this is an okay stage too. I'm gonna put it in C. It's another stage with a really cool premise. It's a military base with a secret lab, and it's underwater, and I just like how big the place is and how high the ceilings are. I don't know if I have megalophobia, but this stage... it makes me feel something similar to what those flood tunnels in Tokyo do, and the music helps with that as well. There's a lot of combat in this stage, which is fine. As I said, Shadow's combat is fun, and by this point you should have more chaos powers. And also, the platforming sections are still good. I do like how it makes use of those mercury-looking ball things to homing attack, and I also don't mind the part where Silver briefly takes over, because I also really like Silver's gameplay in this game. Next up is Wave Ocean, which is one of my favorite Sonic stages, but Shadow's Wave Ocean just doesn't do it for me. I'm putting this in D. You can tell that they were really pressed for time here because there's so much ground to explore in this stage, but not much to do. It's another stage that starts off on the glider, which is always great. In fact, you can fly it through the cave, and it's probably my favorite of these sections. But then Control goes to Omega, who... I don't know, I just don't like the way he plays in this game. He just feels like Budget Gamma, which I guess that's what he is. The whole reason he exists is because fans wanted to bring back Gamma, but Sega didn't want to ruin his story by reviving a dead character, so we got Omega. His attacks feel weak, and it just feels like a coin flip whether they do damage or not. When Control goes back to Shadow, a good chunk is spent trying to figure out where to go until you find the hovercraft, which you drive around until you find the goal ring. Now we're on Shadow's last 06 stage, Dusty Desert, and I do not like this level either, so I'm also going to put it in D. For the first part, you're on the hovercraft trying to go through a series of pillars, which you have to go through to know where to go, but it's very easy for your vehicle to tip over, and that results in a death. This was the case with the other hovercraft sections, but here, you're not over water, you're over quicksand that's piled up like hills? I don't get it. And then, when you get inside the temple, 3/4 of it have you playing as Omega, who, again, his attacks only connect when the game will let them, and there's a lot more combat in here than in the previous stage. Not to mention, it's disorienting. They tried to go for another non-linear structure, and many of the areas look the same, which results in you getting lost and backtracking when you didn't even mean to. The parts where you have to jump over the sand waves are kind of cool, and Shadow's combat sections are kind of fun, but it's not enough to save the stage from being any higher than D, and it's a very disappointing final stage for Shadow. The best thing about this stage is the fight against Mephiles at the end, but as I said, we're ranking stages, not bosses. Maybe I'll make another video for bosses. And before I move on, some of you are also probably asking where's Shadow's section in the end of the world, which, I don't know, I don't really think it's long enough for me to do an entire section about it, but, I mean, it's basically just part of Kingdom Valley with those black hole eyeball things. I mean, I don't really know what to say. I mean, it's cool, it's interesting, but I guess if I had to put it somewhere, I'd put it in C. Now we're at the next game with Shadow's own stages, which is Sonic Forces, which came out in 2017. Wow, Sega was really embarrassed about Shadow in 06, so much so that they didn't even give Shadow any more of his own stages. I mean, he was playable, but mostly in spin-offs, or as a bonus, like he was playable in Black Knight, but he just plays through the same stages as Sonic. But even in Forces, he was relegated to just being a DLC character. Episode Shadow is extremely short, only 3 stages with 1 act each, and they all suck. I'm not the biggest fan of Forces, which is a flaming hot take, I know, and Episode Shadow doesn't really do much to help with my opinion on this game. I guess I'll start with Enemy Territory since that's the best stage in this DLC, and the fact that it's in C doesn't really paint a good picture for this game. We have a pretty awesome remix of Westopolis for a soundtrack and some decent 3D and 2D platforming sections, but there's just not much to it. Like, there's not much in the way of alternate pathways or shortcuts or anything, just you have one way to go and you have to do it. Kill the enemies, collect rings, avoid hazards, you do all that for around 2 minutes, and then you're done. And then you have to do Eggman's Facility. E. You start out on a water slide bouncing against some ladybug robots, and then you have to go around some spiky balls just like we did in the stage before, and then another water slide, and then there's some homing attacks, and wow. I know that was about the same length as Skyrail, but it feels a lot shorter. And lastly, we have Virtual Reality, which is set in Green Hill, because I guess Sonic Team didn't think we've been to Green Hill enough times, so they decided to bring Shadow there. D. It's entirely in 2D, and I do like the new hazards that are these moving floating cube things, but I also don't like it when I'm forced to come to a dead stop to wait for the chance to jump, and then have to wait for an opening to come back around when I fail, especially when there are no shortcuts or tricks to get around it. I also don't like being punished with death when I miss a homing attack against flying enemies when there was no warning. There's a pretty awesome remix of Supporting Me from Adventure 2, but why is that playing in Green Hill Zone? I don't know. I'm just glad to be done with Sonic Forces because now I can talk about Shadow Generations, an amazing game all around. Heck, as much of a Shadow the Hedgehog fan I am, I'd go so far as to say that this is Shadow's best game yet. Amazing level design, great gameplay, great music, and Shadow has new abilities and new powers. Let's start ranking the levels so that I can talk more about it. And we'll start with Space Colony Arc, which I will put in A. It seems to be a mishmash of all the Arc stages from Adventure 2 and Shadow the Hedgehog, and it's everything you would expect from a Shadow game. Fast-paced action and platforming. You've got shortcuts and different pathways that reward you for playing well. You've got grinding, you're introduced to those little mirages from Black Doom or whatever they're supposed to be, and these distort the level and send you through something completely different, which is pretty neat. I mean, one moment you're on the Arc, the next you're in Radical Highway. The second act is more the same, but in 2D, which I'm not the biggest fan of 2D sections in the 3D games, but for the second act, it's okay, especially because it's just so much fun. Now, those of you Heroes fans may be happy to see that. While I can't put any stages from Heroes on here, I can include Rail Canyon from Shadow Generations, and it's also pretty awesome, so I'm going to put it in B. As to be expected, there is a much bigger focus on grinding here, so there aren't as many opportunities for shortcuts. For the Black Doom parts, there's a lot of the stage that's spent skydiving, and there are parts where you can use your Chaos Spear to stop those Black Doom fan things. I do think the second act makes things a little more interesting with the 2D grinding, and avoiding the train is fun, and if you're having trouble, Chaos Control can help with that. It's a very cool stage though, and in my opinion, it's actually a lot better than Rail Canyon in Sonic Heroes. Now, Kingdom Valley was my favorite stage in 06, and it's not my favorite stage here, but it's still a great one, so it's going to go in A. It's another stage that has a lot of rails, it's got some combat, it makes use of those jump ropes, and it's also the first stage to make use of Shadow's surfing power. In my opinion, it's not quite as cool as the hovercraft, it doesn't have a machine gun or anything, but the fact that Shadow can do this all by himself is pretty awesome, and it makes for some interesting gameplay. It does kind of suck that there is no Black Doom section here, but there's plenty of that in the other stages, so I won't count that against this stage. And this stage just looks so beautiful, and the footage you're seeing is of the Switch version. I'm sure the current gen versions look way better. Okay, now we have Sunset Heights, which is a good stage, but it is one of the weaker ones in this game in my opinion. It's still good, just not amazing, which is why I'm putting it in B. This stage is more focused on hazard avoidance than combat or platforming. It's a good way to make use of chaos control, and the Black Doom section of this stage isn't that great. It's mostly just avoiding hazards in some tube-like thing and then some grinding. This is also probably the only stage in the game where I actually think the second act is better than the first, and a large part of that is because of the robot in the background that's constantly destroying the platforms, forcing you to either be insanely fast or change your plan on the fly, or make good use of chaos control, and this is probably the best stage for that. I also like how it starts you off outside in a rainstorm and then brings you inside, and then outside again, and there's also some surfing too, which I will give it points for. Now we're at Chaos Island, the Frontier stage, and I also quite like this stage. I will put it in B. As I keep saying, this game has some good stages, and I'm especially fond of the level design schemes of Frontier, so this is a great stage for me. I don't know if this is just a me thing, but the environments and frontiers and this stage they kind of remind me of Halo. Kind of a weird comparison, but this stage is also designed around Shadow's new squid form thing. It's like this thing where he can morph into a squid and swim along this purple goo, like an inkling, and he can also swing off of floating goo balls. It's kind of weird for Shadow, but it's still cool, and it works well for the 2D stage, which is designed to be more like a vertical maze. But there are these moving platforms, which I don't really like, it just kind of kills the pace for me, so I do have to dock it some points for that, but it's still a great stage. Last but not least, we have Radical Highway, and I do love this stage, but this may be the only stage where I actually prefer the original over the remake and Shadow Generations. Funnily enough, it actually tries very hard to be almost exactly like Radical Highway in many parts. The opening and many parts are almost exact recreations of it, and it also recreates many of the same gimmicks like the bar swinging. But another thing about the stage is how it lets you use the Doom Wing, which lets Shadow fly. Yeah, it sounds cool, and it is, especially when it lets you make your own shortcuts, but parts of the stage that are designed around it, well, if you screw something up, you're probably gonna die, and this has caused me some annoying and frustrating deaths. Plus, you need 50 rings to do it, and dying means losing all your rings, so have fun using it after your death. It is kind of neat that the second act is the only one that's not entirely in 2D, and it's also set during the day, so if you ever wanted to know what Radical Highway was like in a brighter setting where everything is all twisted and screwed up, well, here you go. It's a great level, but it's not my favorite in this game, but it is one of the stronger B-tier levels, I will say, and the fact that there isn't a single level in Shadow Generations that's C-tier or lower really says a lot about this game's quality. And we are done. That is it. I have just ranked all of Shadow's stages in the entire Sonic series, which wasn't actually as many as I was expecting going in. But as always, guys, be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to check out my other links in the description, and until the next video, I will see you all later.